Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Ridley, revoir un latte.
Stop on this for a minute. The nation's attorney general is not sure about the connotations of the word spying. Let that sink in. The New York Times on Barr's comments reports, quote, it was not immediately clear what Mr. Barr was referring to, and he did not present evidence to back up his statement. The FBI obtained a secret surveillance warrant on a former Trump campaign advisor, Carter Page, after he left the campaign, and reports have suggested it used at least one confidential informer to collect information on campaign associates. The Washington Post adds that at least one person was likely cheered by Barr's comments today. Quote, Barr's surprising comments echo attacks President Trump has made against the FBI, and his words provide fresh ammunition to those who have branded the Russia investigation an illegitimate attempt to derail Trump's presidency. But Mark Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intel Committee, had a different reaction.
I'm flabbergasted by the Attorney General's comments. I don't get it. The word spying, when you start linking spying with law enforcement or the intelligence community, that sets off red flags everywhere. And that's why I think he does a disservice to the men and women who work at the Department of Justice and the FBI, who, if they had not started a counterintelligence investigation into Russia's intervention in the 2016 election, they would be skewered, and rightfully so.
And that's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, Politico national security correspondent Natasha Bertrand, and our table for the hour, former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards, Phil Rucker, White House bureau chief for the Washington Post, former chief of staff to Vice Presidents Joe Biden and Al Gore, Ron Klain, and former RNC chairman Michael Steele. I have to start with you, Ron Klain. The word spying means something, and if you're, I don't know, a tourist on the street, you could mix up the word spying with authorized surveillance, authorized by a FISA warrant signed by the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. But if you're the sitting Attorney General and you've actually sat as the country's Attorney General before, you don't mix up the word spying with the word authorized surveillance, authorized by a FISA application signed by the sitting Deputy Attorney General, do you?
No, you don't, Nicole. And it was a shame, I think, today to see Bill Barr, one of our nation's most respected lawyers, a two-time Attorney General, turn in his tortoiseshell glasses for a tinfoil hat. I mean, what he was talking about was really the craziest Trump conspiracy theories that are out there, that only the president's most fringe allies dared to advance. Now, what we know is that this has been investigated 5 times previously by Republican-led committees, and nothing came of it. The Justice Department has been defending its practices here. They've been investigated internally. They've been investigated externally. And indeed, when Senator Reid, in that clip you just showed, pressed the Attorney General, hey, do you have evidence for this claim? He said, well, no. So, I mean, it was irresponsible, flaky, and way out of right field.
I don't see it. I'm not sure. I hope it's flaky, Michael Steele. But I think I saw Republicans like Jeff Sessions under oath before Congress push back against Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, and people like that when they were calling for a second, so when they were calling for these sorts of things. And I think that we may come to a point where clearing Trump on obstruction may be the least damage that Barr did as Attorney General.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I don't think anything that we heard from the Attorney General is surprising, at least not to me. Look, he has the job. He has the job for a reason, and he's doing the job that he was hired to do. And at the end of the day, that is to make sure that the president's narrative is not somehow derailed or stopped in some fashion. So he sits there in front of the committee and he throws out a very highly volatile, explosive word. He knew daggone well when he dropped the spy word on that table what it meant and what it would do. Yes, Donald Trump appreciated the moment because it's consistent with the other moments that Donald Trump wants to create around this narrative. And now he's got the help in the most important office right now in the land with respect to these investigations and finding out the truth to carry that narrative forward.
Joyce Vance, people like you have called William Barr an institutionalist. You've said give him the benefit of the doubt. In the last 2 days in public testimony, are there any new questions that you have, either on the process wherein he took a non-conclusion on the obstruction question from Mueller and steamrolled through, rendered his own judgment, something that anyone who read his obstruction memo could have predicted he would have done, and then today by inserting and injecting the word spying about the conduct of the American law enforcement and intelligence community, the most highly regulated and sort of walled-off process, this FISA court. And FISA applications, on Carter Page's case, I believe there was 1 and then 3 reauthorizations, and I believe Rod Rosenstein, who still sits in the DAG's office, signed at least a few of those.
You know, there have always been questions about Barr stemming from that now notorious memo that opining on the outcome of this investigation before he was even the Attorney General. So he's always had that problem. But I think everyone who loves the institution of the Department of Justice, myself included, I feel like a kid when you're just old enough to realize that there really isn't a Santa Claus. But you want so bad for there to be a Santa because you love Christmas so much. And you hold on to it for as long as you can. And it gets increasingly more difficult. And today with Barr, that's just become an impossibility. Attorney generals don't go into these hearings unprepared. They don't just walk in without sometimes days of preparation and murder boards. And so the use of this term spying has to be a deliberate term, a term that was meant to really set people on fire. And Barr knows full well that there are checks and balances in place both at the FBI and in the intelligence community before this form of intelligence collection is used. It's arguable that he doesn't even have any sort of authority to review the way collection was done in the intelligence community. Certainly, he might have some oversight at DOJ, but that process has been done in Congress repeatedly. There is more review underway by his own Inspector General. So this notion that he now personally will look into spying really does the last little bit to shred his credibility.
It is Thursday, the 11th of April of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Speaking of spice, well, Julian Assange has been arrested in London. Looks like he may be on his way here, and I can only imagine why. Now, we do know that Donnie loved his WikiLeaks. Love WikiLeaks. So, but these charges stem from a passcode that Assange cracked that Chelsea Manning did not have, but she got arrested because he left her out to dry, and she's went to jail. And actually, she's back in jail now for contempt of court. So there's that. And it couldn't have happened to a more smelly person. Boy, I bet that Ecuadorian embassy needs to Febreze it all over. Yeah, that place must stink to high heaven. Ew. Well, at least he's going to get a shower now. They clean you up pretty good when they put you in federal prison. So we'll see how that shakes out. I'm not necessarily a big fan of journalism and journalists being thrown in jail or publishers being thrown in jail, but I don't think he is any of those. I think he is a fence. And that means he's a criminal. He traffics in stolen information. And I think jail is exactly the place that he should be. Indeed. Trump is going on TV touting some exceedingly high approval ratings, except the actual poll shows the numbers to be much lower. He got these numbers from Lou Dobbs, that he has, like 53, 54% approval, when the actual number is 42%. But, his deplorable low information voters that elected him wouldn't know or care anyway. And that's how, the gaslighting continues. Do we allow it to continue? I don't think so. Looks like Texas is having some problems with extreme gun rights activists showing up now, even at Republican homes and meetings, and threatening them. So that goes on. I guess they have a Second Amendment right to intimidate elected officials, and I guess you would call that terrorizing them for a political end. So we have a bunch of terrorists right here in this country trying to push politics from the point of a gun. Huh. Who knew? So, and I believe it's also Texas. Am I right about this? Is it Texas or is it like another southern state? They want to be able to impose the death penalty on women who have had abortions. Wow. I wrote a story quite a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, a little short story about a dystopian world where even finding out information on how to get an abortion it would result in the death penalty. And in my little short story, I followed the plight of a woman who was in a hospital after a rape and asked if she had the legal right to have an abortion. And a medical personnel there reported her to the appropriate authorities, and they arrested her then and there. And in a speedy trial that took only about 2 weeks, they did condemn her to death. And while pregnant, put her and the fetus to death because the law is the law. Yeah, so they'll kill a woman for seeking an abortion and the fetus that she's carrying too. That's where it's going, folks. I shouldn't have written that story, because it may have been a blueprint. You never know. So I think that we may be on a turning point there as well. Speaking of turning points, this is shocking. I would have never thought that this could have happened. But the son of a deputy in Louisiana has been arrested. Holden Matthews, 21-year-old son of a St. Landry Parish deputy, has been arrested for the 3 most recent fires at black churches in Louisiana. He also belongs to some really radical heavy metal and groups and other groups, music and otherwise, that are neo-Nazi in total, actually. So I'm shocked that the neo-Nazi son of a deputy in Louisiana would be burning down black churches. I'm just shocked. Hey, even Fox News had to cut away from Trump yesterday when he started going off incoherently about fences and trucks. Even Fox News. What else is happening here in the Bistro Cafe, a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, of course, that was Bill Barr. Bill Barr was going off about spying. He isn't able to tell the difference between authorized surveillance and spying. Now, spying is a term that Hollywood writers use, novelists. And let us not forget it was Rosenstein, who signed off on the FISA warrants. I am really astounded, too, that the Trump administration is arguing about FISA abuse. Think of all this time. I mean, FISA abuse. But now, when you've caught the guy red-handed, it's FISA abuse. And we can't get his taxes. because the more you know, the more you know. Indeed. What's on the rest of the menu? Federal prosecutors brought charges against telemedicine executives and doctors in a sprawling $1.2 billion orthopedic braces Medicare fraud scheme. And they want to know why medical prices are so high. 190 House Republicans voted against the bill to reinstate net neutrality internet protections. The bill did pass in the House, unlikely to pass in the Senate. 190 Republicans stood and said, no, throttle them all. And the acting director of ICE resigned after being slighted by the Trump administration. He wanted more, they wanted less. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where New Zealand police expect tens of thousands of firearms to be surrendered in a massive guns buyback scheme after Parliament passed tough new firearm laws. Only in a few weeks they were able to do this. How many decades have we gone? And Augusta National Chairman Fred Ridley is not even used to blacks playing at the Masters golf tournament. Now they're trying to ram a woman's Masters down his throat. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Do engage, and she's there most of the time. Of course, you know we all have real lives and we all have to pay real bills, but that is a good place to check in. If you would like to take a look to the left-ish of the page, at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the contribute button. Do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. This powerhouse of resistance has been on the air 24/7, 365 for the last 8 years. So we're hard workers here, and your generosity, what you know, other than what we pull out of our wallets, our biggest contributor is you. And your generosity has kept Netroots Radio resisting for these past 18 years. And we still need your help, because after 8 years, machinery starts to break down, and we've been saving our money to buy new equipment, or newish equipment. And, of course, bills keep going up, and you help us put a big dent in that as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you could do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that platform. Thank you, Tom. I take care of Justice Putnam on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then scramble to get those links out on social media. And I'm pretty busy those last 10 minutes. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, iHeart, etc., etc., etc. Okay, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It is by Daniel Conrad out of Courthouse News. Federal prosecutors brought charges on Tuesday accusing telemedicine executives and doctors of defrauding the government in $1.2 billion in a Medicare fraud scheme centered on unneeded orthopedic braces. In a case it calls one of the largest healthcare fraud schemes investigated, the Department of Justice claims the accused executive and medical professionals would refer their patients to durable medical equipment companies for unnecessary back, shoulder, wrist, and knee braces, and those companies return the favor in the form of bribes or other kickbacks. Oh, I thought it was a royalty. Maybe not. Or a finder's fee. It wasn't a bribe, it was a finder's fee. Some of the defendants allegedly controlled an international telemarketing network that lured over hundreds of thousands of elderly and or disabled patients into a criminal scheme that crossed borders, involving call centers in the Philippines and throughout Latin America. Oh no, it's the brown people's fault. Of the $1.7 billion in Medicare claims submitted by medical equipment companies, over $900 million was reportedly paid out. The 24 defendants charged, including executives of 5 telemedicine companies, owners of medical equipment companies, and 3 licensed medical professionals, are responsible, allegedly, for a total of over $1.2 billion in losses to the federal government. Prosecutors say some of the money was laundered through international shell corporations and used to buy expensive cars, yachts, and luxury real estate in the U.S. and abroad. I wonder how many Trump condos are part of this largesse. These defendants, who range from corporate executives to medical professionals, allegedly participated in an expansive and sophisticated fraud to exploit telemedicine technology meant for patients otherwise unable to access health care, Assistant Attorney General Brian Benkowski said in a statement. Defendants were charged in California, Florida, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Texas. The indictment was not immediately available by early Tuesday afternoon, though South Carolina U.S. Attorney Sherry Linden said, white-collar crime is not victimless. I know, we have a president of the United States right now, and we're the victims. Now, more than 80 search warrants were issued across 17 federal districts for this and related investigations into potential healthcare fraud. The Justice Department named 5 companies, Affordadoc, First Care MD, Integrated Support Plus, Video Doctor USA, and Web Doctors Plus, and urges anyone aware of allegedly fraudulent schemes involving those companies to contact the FBI. Josh Israel of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. House Republicans sided with the Trump administration opposing a bill to reinstate the Federal Communications Obama-era net neutrality rules, despite growing support for such a move amongst consumers. Well, Aaron Schwartz is pretty angry about this from beyond the grave, I would think. The bill passed the House 232 to 190, but it is unlikely to make it past the Republican-controlled Senate. Just one House Republican, Representative Bill Posey, a Republican of Florida, voted for the bill, which means, and my little representative, Greg Walden, did not vote for it. He voted against it. Well, I guess we're going to have to try to get rid of him again. They've been trying. H.R. 1644, the Save the Internet Act of 2019, authored by Mike Doyle, Democratic representative of Pennsylvania, would codify the 2015 FCC policy that ensured Internet providers treat all data requests equally and do not throttle traffic to less favored sites. Donald Trump, handpicked Commission Chair Ajit Pai, pushed through a repeal of the policy in late of 2017 because it was the black guy's thing. For consumers, the idea is pretty simple. Under net neutrality, the people who sell you your internet service cannot charge you extra if you access Netflix or Hulu at the same speed as you access other sites. And they cannot cut a deal with Amazon to let you access Prime Video at a faster speed than YouTube Premium. Well, that's choosing winners and losers. I mean, everybody wins there, and that's not American. Doyle described his bill as one that would repeal the repeal and codify the open internet order. House Republican leaders denounced it as a government takeover of the internet. You know, they project so much. They're trying to get a government takeover of the internet. Tightly wedded with commerce. Some people would call that fascism. At a Tuesday press conference, Representative Greg Walden made the odd claim that reverting to these rules might somehow lead to an internet tax. They just lie through their teeth. Will this bill allow government taxation of the internet? The answer is yes, we think it will, he charged. No evidence proving that that could be the case. They just like to pull it out of their rear end. Not only does the bill include no provisions allowing new taxes or fees, which Congress could theoretically institute under the current status quo, it actually does the opposite. The bill's text restores the FCC rules to the way they were on January 19th of 2017, a time at which the Commission said it would not apply additional taxes or fees. Although congressional Republicans and the Trump administration have fiercely opposed net neutrality, the public is not especially divided on the issue. In fact, over the past 2 years, between 78 and 83% of Americans support net neutrality and the Obama-era rules. Support for net neutrality is growing, Mozilla officials wrote in a blog post. When we asked the same question in 2017, 86% of Americans believe this. Now 91% do. Rebecca and Tralgo of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You know, it's really bad when the acting directors are now getting ousted. They're running out of people to oust. Ronald Vitiello, acting director of ICE, announced yesterday, Wednesday, that he will leave his post effective tomorrow, Friday, becoming the latest in a string of top-level officials to resign from the DHS. The recent departures leave DHS in a state of disrepair just month before apprehensions on the southern border are expected to reach their yearly peak. Well, of course, Donald Trump said that he would like to machine gun all of them, and then he said, "Nah, I wouldn't do it. You couldn't do that. But it'd be really efficient and it'll go fast." So I guess if you want to do that, you got to get rid of the leadership. Vitiello's resignation comes 1 week after Trump pulled his consideration for ICE director, reportedly because Stephen Miller believed Vitiello was not tough enough on immigration enforcement. Yeah, because he probably didn't want to machine gun all the people. I would like to express my deep thanks and gratitude for the opportunity to serve with our incredible workforce, Vitiello wrote to employees in an email first reported by Politico. The critical work we do is essential to the safety and security of the nation, he added, and none do it with greater pride and determination than the men and women of ICE. Hey, you're still Gestapo, and so's the DHS. The agency has not announced a successor, though. Acting deputy director. Boy, they have a lot of acting. Matthew Albence, who likened immigration detention to summer camp. Yeah, there's always icebox baby gulags at the summer camp we go to now, isn't there? Well, it would theoretically be next in line, that guy. News of Vitiello's departure was preceded by 3 big-name resignations within the DHS. Really? I thought they were firings. Including outgoing agency secretary Kirsten Nielsen, Sieg Heil! Secret Service Director Randolph Ailes, and John Mitnick, the agency's general counsel. Other top DHS officials, including U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Director Francis Cisna, are rumored to be on their way out, also because of Miller's preference for immigration hardliners within the administration. You know, they took a poll and said, do you think machine gunning black and brown people at the border is the way to go? And if people would say, I think that constitutes a war crime, or that might be murder. Well, those people are out, because Trump doesn't follow the law. We also need to remember that the third in line at DHS was kicked out, made to resign, a 25-year veteran employee, career employee, gone, because she was next in line after Kirsten Nielsen because there was no number 2. So, made to resign. I think it's more like they were fired. Stephen Miller, some people call him the Santa Monica Goebbels. Other people call him Himmler Miller, or Miller Himmler, who has a history of using anti-immigrant and white supremacist dog whistles, is said to be gaining more prominence within the White House. Trump and Miller are reportedly thinking of implementing harsher asylum rules and are pushing for family separations to resume. Unlike his predecessor, Thomas Homan, Vitiello largely remained out of the spotlight during his DHS tenure. Homan, who retired last summer, was a favorite of the Trump administration, frequently making the rounds on Fox News and other cable news networks defending the president. Homan refused to label Trump's family separation policy inhumane and invoked the Nazi Germany era Nuremberg defense, saying ICE officials were simply following orders when conducting separations at the border last spring. The banality of evil, Homan. You are pretty much an exemplar of it. Vitiello's failure to defend the Trump administration's immigration policies with the same fervor as Homan may have been his downfall. Presently, there are no Senate-confirmed officials in 7 top positions within DHS, including Inspector General, Deputy Secretary, or FEMA Administrator. The number of open positions at DHS is emblematic of Trump's patchwork cabinet, which is full of acting directors and acting secretaries after a wave of resignations and firings. All right, let's get on to our break. And we're a little bit into it, but that's okay. We're a salon. When we come back from that break, you know that we will be going through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, unnecessary lessons. What 9/11 and 7/7 were for their respective cities, the Lashkar-e-Taiba attacks in 2008 were for the Indian city of Mumbai. And it is painfully, even brutally, now recounted in the new Hotel Mumbai, named for the main, but not only target of those terrorists. As with most pictures like this, the story is built around a few victimized characters, some of whom emerge as heroes. Here we have wealthy newlyweds, played by Armie Hammer and Nazanin Boniadi, their infant child and nanny, plus a nasty Russian mobster oligarch, Jason Isaacs, and a resourceful Taj waiter, brought off by who else but Dev Patel. The terrorist characters are developed to some extent as well. The line director Anthony Moras must walk here is to portray them accurately without over-humanizing them for the sake of the still very much traumatized victims. While this limits illumination, we do see their comfort level with cell phones and modern weaponry, side by side with their amazement at flush toilets. We hear their doubts, but can see they're clearly long past thinking for themselves. And there's one unseen character, a cell phone voice only, providing tactical direction and quote-unquote moral encouragement. If a measure of a movie is realism, Hotel Mumbai succeeds. It does have the issue of character survival time as a function of the actor's star power, but without spoilers, not to the extent of some similar projects. The emotive reaction to the displayed horror in a movie like this is obvious, but after so many incidents presaging so many movies, the question is begged as to the presence of a more significant point. There really isn't much of one in Hotel Mumbai, but it's a quality ride, and you will tense in your seat rooting for the heroes. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jim Daly. No wonder they call New York the city that never sleeps. In fact, noise is one of the biggest civic complaints made by denizens of the Big Apple. Now, a project that uses citizen science and artificial intelligence, AI, is trying to help. Called Sounds of New York City, or SONIC, the effort combines a network of sensors that constantly monitor ambient noise, along with machine learning and human volunteers.
The SONIC project has two main goals. We want to advance the science and engineering of machine listening, and we want to help monitor and mitigate noise pollution in urban areas.
Oded Nov, a professor of technology management and innovation at NYU's Tandon School of Engineering.
Over the past 2 years, our sensors collected huge amounts of urban sound data, and we need volunteers to label these sounds.
That's where citizen science comes in. SONIC needs members of the public to listen to ambient sounds picked up by noise monitors and label the sounds so the computers can learn to independently recognize them.
Labeling sound is harder than labeling images because sound is invisible and ephemeral.
But once people label sounds and enter them into a computer, the machines have an easier time telling, say, a jackhammer from an idling truck.
Anyone with a computer or a smartphone can participate in this research project. Search for SONIC NYU and start labeling short sound recordings online. The more labeled examples we give our computers, the better they become at recognizing sounds.
The information could help inform city agencies about where they should try to cut the noise most. With a little help from citizen scientists, SONIC just might be able to let the city that doesn't sleep finally get a little shut-eye. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jim Daly.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. For years, auto workers had participated in a series of sit-down strikes and walkouts. They had won union recognition from almost every major automaker in the country. But the Ford Motor Company, the giant of the American auto industry, would not budge. Ford used many tactics to undermine unionization. He hired many black workers with the idea that a racially divided workforce would be less likely to work together. He enlisted Detroit area pastors to recruit his workers. If a pastor would not support Ford's anti-union stance, then no members of that church would be hired. Ford also raised employee wages in an effort to win their loyalty. Ford created the Ford Service Department. The 8,000-member department included uniformed security who kept an eye out for union organizing, going so far as to use undercover spies to infiltrate union meetings. If none of those tactics worked, Ford simply fired thousands of workers who dared to speak out for a union. Despite all of this, the push for a union continued to grow. The effort was fueled in part by work speed-ups that led to more and more on-the-job injuries. Members of the Communist Party took a lead in organizing at Ford. This led to howls from the press about the red influence. Finally, on April 2nd, workers walked off the job to protest yet another round of firing union organizers. Some 85,000 workers marched in 27 picket lines. Despite Ford's effort to create a racial divide, more than 80% of the black workers joined the strike. Finally, today in labor history, Ford agreed to sit down with the United Auto Workers. At long last, one of the most anti-union employers in the U.S. had been brought to the bargaining table. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Attorney General William Barr was on Capitol Hill Wednesday for a second day of testimony. Barr outraged congressional Democrats after he suggested Donald Trump's 2016 campaign was spied on and said he'll investigate the FBI's actions that led to the Russia probe.
Well, for the same reason we're worried about foreign influence in elections, we want to make sure that during an election, I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal. I'm not talking about the FBI necessarily, but intelligence agencies more broadly.
So you're not suggesting, though, that spying occurred?
I don't. I guess you could. I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
Barr didn't offer any evidence to back up his shocking statement. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, at a Democratic Party retreat, fumed that Barr was going off the rails.
The chief law enforcement officer of our country is going off the rails yesterday and today. He is Attorney General of the United States of America, not the Attorney General of Donald Trump.
Julian Assange has been arrested by British police inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London as footage shows him being dragged out of the building he's been living in for nearly 7 years. The city's police force confirmed the arrest in a statement Thursday morning. Quote, police were invited into the embassy by the ambassador following the Ecuadorian government's withdrawal of asylum. Assange took refuge in the embassy in 2012 to avoid extradition to Sweden over a sexual assault case. That case has been dropped, but British police arrested him for not surrendering to the court. WikiLeaks has repeatedly claimed that the U.S. Justice Department is building a criminal case against Assange over the leaking of Democratic emails hacked by the Russians in the 2016 election. The U.S. is seeking extradition, and U.S. officials have filed computer hacking charges against Julian Assange in connection with their release of classified government cables from former Army private and intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning. While we're in England, once again, Brexit is delayed. This time it's being put off until Halloween. This after the European Union agreed to give the UK until October 31st to figure out how it will leave the trading bloc. Here at home, the top ranks at the Department of Homeland Security are emptying out. So far, it's Kirstjen Nielsen, the Secretary, Tex Alice, Secret Service, Claire Grady, Acting Deputy Secretary, Ron Vitiello, ICE Acting Director, and most likely Frank Cisna of USCIS. With these changes, 12 of the 30 leadership positions on the department's organization chart will have been vacant, replaced, or filled on an interim basis. The Trump administration missed a Wednesday deadline set by Democrats to hand over the president's tax returns, as the two sides edge closer to an epic legal battle that could rise all the way to the Supreme Court. New Zealand's parliament on Wednesday did what they said they would do and passed sweeping gun laws that outlaw military-style weapons, less than a month after mass shootings at two mosques in Christchurch left 50 people dead and dozens more wounded. The New York Times reporting that Marianne Trump Barry, Donald Trump's older sister, is retiring as a federal judge. Trump Barry was hit with a misconduct complaint last October stemming from a report that the Trump family used fraudulent tax schemes to increase their inheritance. Retiring from the bench ends that investigation. The House voted Wednesday to reinstate Obama-era net neutrality rules prohibiting Internet service providers from interfering with web traffic. The bill passed mostly along party lines, as only one Republican, Bill Posey of Florida, voted for the bill. Of course, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell declared Tuesday that the bill is dead on arrival in the upper chamber. And finally, in one of the more surreal moments in congressional testimony history, John Kerry testified at a House committee hearing Tuesday on climate change when it was time for Republican Representative Tom Massey of Kentucky to ask the questions. Keep in mind that Massey has both a bachelor's and a master's degree in robotics from MIT when listening to this.
Secretary Kerry, I want to read part of your statement back to you. Instead of convening a kangaroo court, the president might want to talk with the educated adults he once trusted to fill his top national security positions. It sounds like you're questioning the credentials of the president's advisors currently, but I don't think we should question your credentials today. Isn't it true you have a science degree from Yale?
Bachelor of Arts degree.
Is it a political science degree?
Yes, political science.
So how do you get a Bachelor of Arts in a science?
Well, it's liberal arts education and degree. It's a bachelor.
Okay, so it's not really science. So I think it's somewhat appropriate that somebody with a pseudoscience degree is here pushing pseudoscience in front of our committee today. I want to ask you...
Are you serious? I mean, this is really serious happening here?
You know what? It is serious. You're calling the president's cabinet a kangaroo court. Is that serious?
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. Vice President Mike Pence demanded that Russia pull its troops out of Venezuela on Wednesday, using a meeting of the UN Security Council to declare that the ongoing crisis in the South American nation was in Washington's sphere of influence.
This is our neighborhood, and the president's made it clear that whether it be Russia, whether it be other nations, that they need to step aside.
Pence's comments seem to invoke the Monroe Doctrine dating back to the 1820s that the Western Hemisphere is the exclusive domain of the United States and that foreign meddling in the Americas amounted to a hostile act. Richard Gowan is the UN Director for the International Crisis Group.
I think that the gloves are off, and while Nikki Haley was a strong promoter of America First at the UN, Pence is considerably more assertive.
Case in point, Pence stared down Venezuela's UN ambassador and told him to go home, warning the U.S. would soon introduce a UN resolution recognizing opposition leader Juan Guaido's UN ambassador instead. Pence seemed unaware the UN's Credentials Committee, not the Security Council, is in charge of such decisions. But Gowan says Pence's comments revealed a larger oversight.
There's a growing sense that the U.S. maximum pressure approach to Venezuela inside and outside the UN is losing some support.
Juan Carlos Hidalgo, an analyst for Latin America at the Cato Institute, agrees.
I perceive that the European Union in particular is getting cold feet regarding the strategy towards Venezuela.
Perhaps sensing Pence's appeals weren't having their intended effect, Russian Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia, speaking here through a translator, used language familiar to Pence to suggest the U.S. mind its own business.
If you want to make America great again, and we're all sincerely interested in seeing that, and stop interfering in the affairs of other states.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Why is that chilly? You know, we're only going to have a high of about 54 degrees. Winds are currently out of the northeast at negligible 1 to 2 miles per hour. They call that light variable. We are expecting those winds to shift out of the west-southwest, increasing to 5 to 10 miles per hour in a couple of hours from now. Showers are in our offing. In fact, it's not quite raining yet, and we are expecting just about a quarter of an inch today, with another tenth of an inch tonight. And overnight low in the mid-40s. Let's see. Let me scroll down. Let's see here. Also tomorrow, we're expecting then to have a high of 61, being cloudy with only a slight chance of rain, winds being light and variable. Pollen is rated at none. The air quality index is good at 22 parts per million. And that daytime UV index is hovering in the high range. Caution, caution, caution at 6, down just a little bit from 7 yesterday. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.05 inches. Visibility is at 10 miles, and relative humidity is 86%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. We're popping peas. London is 53 and partly cloudy. Paris is 57 and sunny. Paris in the spring. Rome is 61 with light rain. Kiev is 52, also with light rain. Kabul is 53 with merely just rain. Hong Kong is 74 degrees with thunderstorms. Tokyo is 49 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 and mostly cloudy, with their continuing small craft advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York, New York is 46 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. New Zealand police expect tens of thousands of firearms to be surrendered in a guns buyback scheme after Parliament passed tough new firearm laws in the wake of the country's worst peacetime mass shooting. Lawmakers in New Zealand voted almost unanimously on Wednesday to change gun laws, less than a month after a lone gunman killed 50 people in attacks on 2 mosques in Christchurch. Some people say Christchurch. The new legislation bars the circulation of and use of most semi-automatic firearms, parts that convert firearms into semi-automatic firearms, magazines over a certain capacity, and some shotguns. This includes the gun used by the suspect in the Christchurch shooting. It granted an amnesty until September 30th for people to surrender prohibited items. More than 300 weapons had already been handed in. Police Minister Stuart Nash told Parliament. Deputy Police Commissioner Michael Clement told a news conference that they are not sure how many guns they would receive, as New Zealand has no law requiring people to register firearms. It's a great unknown question. Everybody appreciates that there is no register of firearms with regards to the type of firearms we are talking about, Clement said, so it could be in the tens of thousands, or it could be more. There are about 1.5 million firearms in New Zealand, according to gunpolicy.org. Of these, the government has said that a record of licenses show 13,500 firearms are military semi-automatics. But the number could be higher. Of course. People buy things offline. They don't have to register there. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has estimated that the gun buybacks would cost the government between 100 and 200 million New Zealand dollars, but other government ministers have warned that the cost could be higher depending on how many guns are handed to the police. Well, I would also say the cost of people not dying, you have to factor that in, and that is much more than the money that you're paying for these firearms.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Steve Keating of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Augusta National Chairman Fred Ridley threw cold water on the idea of one day hosting a women's masters alongside the men's majors. In this reporter's opinion, is because he's barely gotten used, in fact, I don't think he has, gotten used to blacks playing at the masters. And I'm looking at you, Tiger. I guess he doesn't like Asian people either. Augusta National, which did not have a woman member until 7 years ago, held its first women's tournament last week on the same course that will play host to the men's major. Ridley, however, said the club has no plans to take another step and develop a women's masters. I mean, you can just imagine him saying, I'm not even used to blacks and you're trying to ram women down my throat. How much do you think I can take? And look, I've got members. They like women even less than I do. To date, all of our Grow the Game initiatives have been focused on amateur golf and amateur golfers, said Ridley during the Augusta National Chairman's annual address on Wednesday. Actually, I think his accent would be more in line with, in this particular case, we elected to conduct a women's amateur tournament for really the same reasons. But we really wanted this to continue in a grow the game sort of mode, as what we might do next. I'm thinking about last Saturday, so I'll start thinking about that next week. Which means he will never think about it. And if he has thought about it, he said, no effing way. We don't want women having a masters. For many, the next logical step is for Augusta to organize a women's masters. The idea, however, does not seem to excite the Augusta membership. While Augusta National is best known as the home of the Masters, Ridley believes the club is better serving the amateur roots of co-founders Clifford Roberts and Bobby Jones in developing the sport by giving its name to a women's amateur competition. No way, not women. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And you know what? Women doing science is scary. The young woman, and she's pretty young, more than a graduate student now, but wrote the algorithm that was able to take the photograph of the first black hole in the history of the world. Einstein predicted it 100 years ago, and now it's been proven. So way to go, women. Scary. All right, let's meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.